We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a last podcast of the year.
Oh dear.
Yay!
I'm the only one actually celebrating Christmas right now.
Are you? Wow. Well, what a show, I tell you. That was a bit impromptu, boys. Sorry, I went a bit off script there. I didn't prepare anybody for that, but I thought, what? Listen, great day today. Firstly, Des, mate, how are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope everyone has a safe and happy time over the Christmas period. But I'm definitely looking forward to it myself. How about you?
Oh, mate, listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start dropping a few hints, but I am looking forward to being unemployed for 3 weeks. Really excited. Let's not forget. So this is awkward. I don't quite know how to respond when we've got a workplace, an employee advocate in the room. Young Oliver, how are you this morning, mate?
Good.
How are you on holidays from your current place of employment?
Yeah.
Nice. And anything exciting planned for the holidays for you, mate?
I don't know. I just hope no Christmas trees fall on people.
As every true safety apprentice would wish for, right? I tell you what, the risks associated with Christmas trees falling on people like that. What would be great, Oliver, is if over the holiday season you could undertake a critical risk assessment for us on said activity. That'd be amazing. This was awkward. Andy,
Hi.
How are you this morning?
A bit apprehensive, but good.
Nice.
Just a couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to formally thank Des for acting as Oliver's safety mentor, and the success of that could be seen by the lack of words that came out of his mentee's mouth in the previous few minutes.
Wow. Anything else to say for yourself, Andy?
I'm sorry.
Well, I tell you what, this is off to a chaotic start already. But boys, listen, we decided to run the last show of the year like we do every show. We thought same, but no different. And because there's still 3 topics on the wheel, of which we've determined 2 of them are Des's, 1 isn't. And you know what it's going to land on today? It's the one that isn't. So super excited to wrap up the year with three topics left on the wheel. That's what we call great planning. But what a big year, boys. Just real quickly in reflection, two a conference and an expo that we emceed, some special shows, some bonus shows. What a year, boys. What a year.
It certainly was very exciting and very exhausting. And I think what this has allowed us to do is have a sound footing where we can grow and develop even more next year.
Des, I just want to say your contribution to the show has been outstanding this year. Every week, every fortnight, I should say, you have stepped up and you have delivered quality products that we can visibly see, touch, and feel in the form of a disclaimer. So I just want to thank you for that, Des.
I feel like everyone's choosing their words very carefully at the moment. There's sort of an air of formality.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen,
over this.
A bit more about the banter at the end of the show, maybe. But listen, as per Des, listen, can you cover us, please, before we head off into spinning the wheel?
Certainly, and as we wrap up the last episode of 2024, I think it's important to finalise some business so we can leave this year where it belongs and start fresh in 2025. So with that in mind, today's disclaimer will take the form of an HR disciplinary meeting for Andy regarding his work ethic. Andy, this meeting is called to address your ongoing refusal to demonstrate anything resembling work ethic, instead insisting that everything must be defined. This is clearly an attempt to avoid providing useful insights or legal advice on a podcast that is strictly for informational purposes. Your approach has led listeners to believe podcasts could serve as a source of professional legal or health and safety advice. It cannot. Listeners should not have to endure your laissez-faire attitude and are strongly encouraged to seek professional advice elsewhere when faced with actual problems. Consider this your official warning. Andy, in the spirit of starting fresh for 2025, I expect you to continue providing your particular brand of questionable commitment, as long as listeners promise not to take it seriously. Now, let's wrap this up and leave 2024 in the rearview mirror where it belongs.
It's okay.
Wow, love it. Thanks, Des. It's always awkward when you need to provide some formality, especially in the form of a disciplinary hearing to an employee. So well done, Des. Thank you for taking that one on the chin for the team. I think you clearly articulated what we've all been thinking over 2024. Thank goodness for Oliver, I tell you, because without that kid, this show would have been nothing. So are we? Look, they both look as good. I think we might need to find Oliver a new coach for somebody else to follow next year, because he's looking at Andy like he's expecting something from him, and as we just heard, he's probably going to be sorely disappointed. So are we? This is too easy. Sorry. Are we ready for the wheel, gentlemen?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. 3 topics left. Des, I just want to wish you the best of luck with this. And here we go. Des, they often talk about Christmas miracles, and to be fair, I think this is the first one of the season. If it is not documented, it did not happen. Wow. Listen, I'm coming straight to you, Des. Initial thoughts, comments, words of whatever. Go for it.
Well, it's been a long time coming, this topic. Wow. That's all I can say.
All this anticipation, all this build-up for one word.
That's it. Wow.
Oh, my God. Oh,
so,
wow. Okay. Now you got me.
I just hope that it carries the show for the duration. It's
Well, is this what we may refer to in circles as suffering from performance anxiety?
I'm a little overwhelmed, I must admit. It's been building up for such a long time.
Wow. Okay.
If it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Stop.
So this is a comment that I've heard numerous times in my safety career.
Okay.
And I think it reflects a very imperfect understanding of what evidence actually is and the power that documents can have in an organization.
Great. Okay. Well, fantastic. Look forward to a vigorating show led by Des, because clearly this is one of Des's topics. So, we've got a sign being held up here by our young apprentice, Oliver. But Andy, over to you, mate. I mean, like a couple of questions for you, actually. Firstly, what are your initial thoughts on Christmas miracles and the fact that Des finally got one of his topics? I mean, he's only contributed 2 the whole year, but the fact that finally one of them landed on the wheel. What are your thoughts to that, firstly, mate?
I wasn't a believer, but now I am.
I almost feel like we need the monkeys in the background. Hey, I'm a believer. Anyway, now thoughts on the topic, though, mate. First things that come to mind. If it is not documented, it did not happen. Go for it.
It's clearly totally and utterly absurd, because most things that happen aren't documented, yet they still happen. Oliver, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Food. Did you write that down somewhere?
Yes, in my brain.
In your brain, you see. So see, Des. This is the Des vibe coming through. It happened in his brain, so that's sufficient. He didn't need to write it down. Very insightful, Oliver.
Wow. Listen, I think before we go any further, I think I might need to spend some one-on-one coaching time with Oliver, because you two are incredibly bad influence on that poor boy. Okay, no, fair enough. So I was getting a bit nervous, Andy. I don't know what you thought was absurd, but you've clarified it. I guess the absurdity is in the fact that the belief that if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen, right? And I'm just going to kind of throw something else out there. Is this similar? And we'll come back to this later on. That if a tree falls over in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, did it make a sound? Is that same? I mean, this is your topic, so I'm going to keep coming back to you on this. Is that the same sort of thing? Do you think the same sort of mentality?
No, and I think you've hit on something actually quite central to where I'm going with this, is that evidence is almost wholly what a person sees, hears, does, says. And if you've got something documented, it still needs to be sponsored by a witness who can attest to it or talk to it in order for that to be evidence.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think we've got to be careful here, Des, because I think we could end up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, right? Like we started to almost get into another topic there to some extent, right, around it. It's all well and good to have it documented, right? So even if you did document it, doesn't mean that's it's almost like a double conundrum, right? If it's not documented, it did not happen. But if it was documented, it didn't necessarily happen either, did it?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily all well and good that you've documented it either. That could be a thorn in your side. It can actually be the sword for a prosecution against you. The fact that you haven't adhered to your own documentation, that's equally as disastrous.
And we'll come back to you on that, I think. I mean, Andy, your thoughts, mate. Like, listen, as a consultant, right, you profess to go out there and work. I'm assuming, unlike on this show, people that actually pay you money expect output, right? So they expect something from you in return for said exchanging of cash, moolah, change, whatever you want to call it. How often are people expecting from you, documented evidence of your supposed work?
Very rarely, actually. Very rarely.
So they're feeding the beast, really. They're feeding the beast.
Again, it's defining what your desired outcomes are, defining terms. If you just go back a moment to the tree in the forest.
The Christmas tree.
The Christmas tree in the forest.
Thank you.
Does it make a sound? Well, it depends what your definition of sound is.
Oh my God.
If sound is noise or sound energy released, then clearly it is. But if sound is more your definition is more related to noise, which is what people hear, and there's nobody around, then no, it's not. So defining your terms, I know I'm potentially risking a second written warning. That's an interesting concept in itself.
In the same show, might I add, Andy?
A second written warning. But I think those sorts of phrases and terms that people throw around are useful, but often they're useful in terms of generating a conversation and discussion, which is valuable in itself.
Okay. I'm going to we're just getting some great feedback in from a friend of the show and now me on LinkedIn. Hey, Keith. Let's run in circles. Clearly, we're going around in circles. So I'm going to kind of pull us back into a bit of formality here, gentlemen. I've got a bit of a script that I like to kind of work through in terms of questioning. But when we start talking, I'm going to stick with you for a bit, Andy. I'm going to give Des a bit of time to ponder this one. But and I know you like to define things, as has been highlighted in your disciplinary hearing this morning. When we talk about, let's just break this up a little bit, right? If it's not documented, when you think about documented stuff in health and safety, what comes to mind for you, Andy?
Oh, in my mind, it tends to be the operational sort of documents, the GSAs, the SWIMs, the SOPs. It's that sort of stuff. I would not think about that at an organisational level in terms of policies so much. For me, that phrase, when I've heard that phrase, it's usually said by safety people, and it's usually spoken towards operational staff to getting them to fill in pieces of paper. Okay,
no, great. Over to you, Des. What are your thoughts when we talk about when we're honing in on this? If it's not documented, it did not happen. What exactly comes to mind for you when you're thinking about these documents? What kind of documents are you alluding to when you threw this up on the board in anger, we'll call it?
Much the same as what Andy just mentioned. I see it come out from safety people asking operations people to fill out and sign documents. I see it from client organizations not accepting anything unless it meets a specific format and is signed and endorsed and all of that, irrespective of whether it actually reflects what's happening on the job. I also see it in external auditors not recognizing any form of evidence other than something that's documented. So I think it's right across the industry, and it's not just limited to safety either. It's pertains, when it comes to auditing, it pertains to quality and other disciplines.
No, fantastic. And I guess I just want to stick with you for a minute, Des. When we talk about these documents that often, like you said, people refer to and hang their hat on and sell snake oil with, is your understanding that generally it's some kind of formalized document, as in it's typed up nice and pretty in kind of Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, whatever you're doing? Is that your understanding, or are we referring here to just stuff on the back of a napkin? What's your kind of take on that?
I think when people ask for everything to be documented, that they're asking for it to be formalized and signed off. And in terms of evidence, documentary evidence can be anything. It can be a scribble on a Post-it note. It can be a photo of something that someone's written in the sand at the beach. It doesn't really matter. When I think the fundamental question that's at issue here is a question of form over substance. Is the form the important part, or is the substance of what it represents the important part? And I think that too many people concentrate on the form when they need to concentrate on the substance.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Well, great. I don't believe I've seen Bridge post in the chat before, so welcome to the party, Bridge. She's thrown up there a number of examples of, I guess, what would be considered documentation that people would be looking for: meeting minutes, checklists, audits, incident reviews, risk assessments. The list goes on. And I guess, interestingly enough, Keith then kind of came in after it, and he says he sees it primarily from an accident investigation point of view. So I guess there's sticking with you there for a minute then. So I guess what always strikes me in my mind is, right, you get people like yourself come out here professing these highfalutin concepts. Oh, you don't need to document anything, yada yada yada. But so in the absence of that, like what are you? So as Keith pointed out, in an investigation, what are you looking for then? Like, can you give us some examples maybe of, if it's not documented, what else could we use to support what we're doing?
Well, I can explain it with reference to a couple of cases, which I can probably provide a citation for in the comments after the show. But there's been instances where if you have fantastic documentation, but one person stands up and says, oh yeah, I signed it, but I never really had the chance to read it properly and I never really understood what it was about. Guess what? That signature, that documentation has almost little or no weighting in terms of evidence because of that person's testimony. In contrast, you can have a dearth of documents, hardly anything documented at all. But if a witness attests to, well, yeah, it wasn't documented, but everyone fully understood what it was, they can all explain it. That's actually excellent evidence, and you don't need to bring a document into the picture.
Yeah, I guess you could almost argue that and we often talk about this, right? People go, oh, we need documented risk assessment or something. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Hold that over my head when the building falls down? Well, in Oliver's case, the Christmas tree falls over, right? I mean, that documented risk assessment is as good as the paper it's written on when something like that happens, right? It's the practical application of the stuff that you're doing, I guess, where the value's added, right? I mean, Andy, what are your thoughts on what Des has been going on about around other opportunities to provide evidence?
I think it's interesting, and myself and Des have spoken about this several times previously. One of the things that interests me a little bit is that there is actually some other value in writing things down. So if you've made some notes of things that have happened, or if you've got a risk assessment, if push comes to shove, that's useful in helping you memorize stuff. So, making notes of meetings, what's happened after an event, Whether that's the evidence or not, I'm not sure. But actually, it helps you remember things, and I think it does hold some weight in certainly in courts. If there is contemporaneous notes, I think they're called. If you've made notes around about the time of the event, I believe they can be submitted as evidence in some cases. But I bow to Des's greatest knowledge. My knowledge of this sort of stuff comes from Des and the Black Belt Barrister on YouTube.
Oh my God. You both raised some valid points there, and I guess I'd be interested in your thoughts as an educator as well. That's what you profess to be behind the scenes, right? Educating. Sorry, what is Oliver holding up? What is he holding up?
Oh, he got an early Christmas present.
No, I can't see it in the background, mate. Sorry.
It's a book.
Yes.
It's called Safety 1 and Safety 2.
Oh.
I had to look through it, but it looked a bit boring since there wasn't any pictures.
Hey, Oliver, I got a secret for you, mate. Listen, your dad and Des might lie to you about safety, but I'm going to tell you something now. 9 out of 10 times, it's as boring as all hell, mate. So that book just lines up with the theory I have on the whole lot. As an educator, Andy, great. So look forward to hearing a book review in the new year, Oliver. Okay, a summarized book review.
Oh no.
Andy, I mean, your thoughts on documentation, right? In today's great world where everything is so interconnected, if you want to go to another country, mate, you just jump on a plane, you can be there the following day. I mean, what are your thoughts around the limitations around documentation and, say English is a second language or the like? Or if you're an English-speaking individual and you head over to another country where English isn't the primary language, what are your thoughts on that and what that might entail for people?
I guess it goes back to the fundamental principle of why, asking the question, why are you doing something? So what is the purpose of this? And is the outcome achieving that? Is the process that we're adopting going to achieve that process? And I think a lot of times in safety, it doesn't. A lot of times we end up doing stuff that actually isn't increasing safety to people.
I think they've coined a phrase. Is that what you're talking about in terms of, and I could be wrong here, maybe I'm coining the phrase out of context, but is that safety clutter thing that you're talking about?
Potentially. I'm not a real fan of that term itself, but it's interesting things that you see. So I fly quite a lot around the country, and New Zealand on their Airbuses, and they've got those delightful safety videos.
Oh, them.
Oh yeah, and they're there, and I'm sat on a flight from Christchurch that I would say at least 70 or 80% of the people on there don't speak that great English. The words are all in English, and the subtitles are all in English. Now, to me, what's the purpose of that video? I mean, there's a whole bigger piece here. Is it to get clicks on YouTube or something, or is it to actually make people safer? But let's save that for another day. But what is the purpose of that? Because if you know that your audience doesn't speak English, why don't put subtitles up in the language that does that meets their need?
I guess the challenge is where do you start and where do you stop, right? With that. But before you carry on, Desmond, what are your thoughts on that and how? I know you mentioned earlier that actually documenting stuff can entrap you to some extent. I mean, what are your thoughts when it comes to that sort of level of entrapment, especially when we're looking at different languages, for example?
Well, let's think about that for a second, because what's the only way you could confirm whether those people understood that message or not? That would be to communicate with them orally and say, ask in a way that they can understand. Did you understand anything in that video? That's your evidence. Whatever they're attesting to, they're oral evidence. They're the witness. They're the sponsor of that. So a documented form of that isn't going to carry much weight compared to their actual response.
So are we kind of, I guess Veronica McDonald's joined the conversation and asked, is documenting things a form of box ticking for some organizations? And Des, I'd love to get your thoughts on that question. Do you think it is just nothing more than a box ticking exercise?
I think yes, it probably is. I think people think they need to do it because they feel like they need to gather evidence. They're evidencing what they've done, and that's a mistake. I think if you understood legal evidence, that's not a great way of evidencing things.
I mean, it would be great, really, if somebody provided maybe some online training, right, around understanding. What is it that you just said? Legal.
Legal evidence.
That's it. Oh my god! Like today's a lot of lasts for me, and I'll tell you what. Thank God this is the last show because clearly I'm losing the plot.
It might very well be the last show for you. Me and Des have got a meeting after this.
So I'll have the first disciplinary of the year. Andy, I mean, what are your thoughts, mate? What are your thoughts on that comment? Do you think people are documenting things purely and simply as a box ticking exercise? And I mean, what are your concerns or worries or thoughts about that?
I think it'd be interesting to understand what the motivation is. I would suspect in many businesses it's about lack of trust and possibly fear of getting into trouble.
Interesting.
So, some organizations that I've worked with, they're getting into this habit of CCing everybody into everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I often wonder why they do that. And it's really about covering the backsides because there's fear, there's uncertainty, there's lack of trust within the organization. I think if you really empower your workers and trust them to get on and do the job well, then people tend to respond to that fairly positively. I'm not saying let them go run wild, run free, but as an educator in my previous career with students, I used to find that worked really, really well. If you show some trust in them, they'll generally respond really, really well. You don't leave them free; you keep monitoring them.
Yeah,
and I think it could be a symptom. Excessive amounts of documentation could be a symptom of a lack of trust within the layers of the organisation.
Well, deep, and we'll have to come back to you on that maybe in the new year, possibly a whole other topic, right? I mean, Des, what your thoughts, mate? I guess so. If I really want people to walk away with this with maybe some real kind of tangible takeaways, right? I mean, it was interesting. I was yesterday, actually. In fact, I was having a chat with one of our sort of operational leads who looks after a particular part of the business that I work in at the moment. And we're talking about, getting his guys engaged and this very topic, actually, documenting kind of what's going on. So we started talking about the use of technology, for example, and going old school. So what I've been trying to encourage our guys to do is, and it's more so from a rationalizing their methodology, for example, drawing it on a bit of paper, right, and taking a photo of it. You could potentially use it as evidence. Some of the other things that we're talking about yesterday, and we're looking at some good examples of just general photography of the site while people are working. I mean, what are your thoughts on using that as some form of documentation?
It depends on. There's no problem with using it as a form of documentation. Just what's the purpose of it? Is it serving as are you developing or retaining that documentation to serve as a legal defense? Then maybe that will work in your favor. Maybe it might work against you. If you're doing it to document sort of the quality of the project as it unfolds, then it probably has a good function. If you're just taking photos for the heck of it, I'd have to question why you're spending your time doing that.
Selfies, mate. LinkedIn post. Selfies. All about the click.
Yeah. Yep. But I want to share an anecdote that from many years ago, we had to develop a management plan for a night shift operation, and we missed getting it signed on the Thursday night, and we were having a meeting and discussing getting it signed at the beginning of the Friday night shift. And we all agreed that was the best approach, and we'll have this signed and it'll be in place. And someone commented, "Oh, that's good that we're getting it signed then, because if it's not signed and something bad happens, we're screwed." And it really struck me, that comment. It's stuck in my mind ever since, because I thought, if something that bad happens, we're kind of screwed anyway, and it doesn't matter whether the document is signed or not. I can't stand in front of a judge and say, "Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry we killed 3 people, but we did sign the night shift plan." That's not a defense.
No, not at all.
And the judge isn't going to look at that and go, "Oh, well, it is signed. Yeah, I guess we'll acquit you or reduce your penalty." No, it doesn't happen like that. They want to look at substance.
Yep.
They want to talk to people and say, "Is any element of this plan actually enforced? Is it actually followed?" And they're going to speak to people actually doing it. So if you want evidence of whether whatever's in that plan is being followed or adhered to or effective, you need to speak to people, and you just can't achieve that by checklists and documentation. And it's without that sort of oral sponsor for that evidence, the documentation carries very little weight.
Interesting. I want to come back to you on that. Sorry, because you've brought this up a couple of times. Sorry, I just got to make a note because I've got a memory like a goldfish at the moment. And so there we go. Jumping back into the conversation, Bridge Marsh. Documentation has a place as evidence, and I think that's where you're sort of going. But it's important to ensure it has a purpose in order for H&S to retain credibility with people filling it in. And she raises a valid point here, right? And unfortunately, some in WorkSafe or any other regulator, because Bridge, we're great to acknowledge we've got an international audience here, still struggle to accept any other type of evidence. And I guess that's the battle that we all face, right? So it's really much about, I guess, that worry that in the event, obviously our primary function is to not want something to go wrong or obviously happen, but in the event it does, there's then that sudden fear that you're going to be prosecuted, right? Because that's the place that WorkSafe are going to kind of go. Andy, what are your thoughts on that around the regulators kind of still honing in on that documentation as the only form of evidence to verify that you've done what you said you're going to do?
I think that's that's a whole show in itself, to be perfectly honest with you. I'll just try and get my head around the concept of it. So if WorkSafe are only accepting evidence that Des is sort of indicating isn't actually evidence, then they should never have a successful prosecution, should they? Oh, White Island.
Shots fired.
I don't know. I'm just putting it out. Is that some sort of logic I'm using there? But if that's right, if they're collecting evidence that isn't actually evidence, and then they take that to court, then surely it's not going to be successful in court.
Not unless it's got someone to sponsor it.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're collecting the evidence, and then they bring the people in to talk about what the evidence actually is. I guess would that be? Yeah, that's what needs to happen. Yeah. But again, that's skewed in itself, because then people, in that respect, people are only talking about the evidence that's been produced, which is only documented evidence. So you end up with a whole
it's the other way around.
Brought to the fore, right? Because it's not documented.
It's the other way around. You only talk about the documents that have been adduced in oral evidence, not the other way around.
Okay. So how would you know to ask, though?
You've got a discovery process.
Right? So is that your defense lawyer's job, effectively?
Yes, but there's a whole discovery process leading into a trial that would.
So I'm gonna put something out relatively maybe I don't know if it's controversial. Actually, I don't think it is. So I'm going to put it out there as we look to wrap up this topic. So Des, you've referred to a number of times, oral sponsorship of said work activities would potentially validate whether it did or didn't happen as it should or shouldn't have happened, and or would clarify whether the documentation for whatever was followed. What would you say if I said to you, would effectively no accidents validate that the way it was supposed to happen happened, right? What would you, if I said, and I haven't probably articulated that very well, but would the evidence of no evidence, as in nothing went wrong, what would you say to that as evidence that clearly there's a process there and clearly the process is working? I know that's possibly bucking the trend to some other concepts out there, but I mean, what are your initial thoughts on that statement?
So if I understand correctly, there's been no incidents.
There's been no incidences.
How do we understand that processes are being followed correctly?
Well, could you use that as evidence that processes are being followed correctly or sufficiently to avoid something bad happening, right?
No, you couldn't just rely on the absence of information in order to support that. In terms of evidence, something that's directly witnessed by someone who can attest to it is probably the best form of evidence you're going to get. So with that in mind, going out and having a look to see whether those processes are being followed is the best evidence you're going to get.
Yeah.
Secondary to that is relying on someone else's direct observation.
Yeah. And so somebody's saying, oh, well, we've worked in this area for X amount of time. We've not seen anybody doing anything wrong or outside of what we would consider normal. And we haven't seen anything go horribly wrong. That would potentially suffice.
Yeah, and you'd probably, if you wanted to go one step further, you'd probably go out there and observe it yourself in action, with the assistance of someone who has intimate knowledge of whatever's going on. If you happen to not have that knowledge yourself,
and I guess that's also potentially where the concept of trying to that's what's the word I'm trying to, I'm having a mare with my words, sorry. But going out proactively, right, and observing our work in place. Because again, if you went in after an event occurred where there was a disastrous outcome, obviously then everybody's going to be on high alert, right? So I guess going out proactively, observing work as done before an incident occurred is quite valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And as Andy alluded to earlier, you can make contemporaneous notes that can serve as an aide-memoire.
Yeah.
Should you be called upon to talk about that particular visit, because it will be difficult to remember things that happened months, years ago.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly valid thing to do.
And I think that this is where, in this day and age, with technology and all that kind of stuff, there's probably some really good ways to do that without having to do that, if you know what I mean. And I was just thinking in terms of a bonus episode or a special show. I know a guy by the name of Cam Stevens. I don't know if you guys are following him on LinkedIn. He's right into there in terms of the IT aspect of things and how they can help in health and safety. And it might be worth a conversation with him around how potentially you could utilize technology to take those notes without having to, I find it quite awkward always to just stop what you're doing. I'm just going to grab some notes. You know what I mean? Like, it's always quite an awkward situation in my mind. But listen, I mean, this has been a great topic, and there's probably a few more have fallen out of it when I go through the show notes after this. But Andy, in terms of wrapping up the content around, if it's not documented, it did not happen. I mean, any sort of final words of wisdom from you as such?
Yep. Anybody in the safety profession, do never utter those words ever again.
Wow. Okay, you've learned nothing from your disciplinary hearing this morning, but hopefully the listeners have, and to understand that maybe don't listen to a thing he says. Des, I mean, how excited have you been? One of your topics, did it go how you thought it would go? Any final words of wisdom for the global audience?
It probably did go the way I hoped it would. Final words it's about the substance, not the form. So worry more about what's actually happening rather than how that's represented in the documentation.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I guess my final thoughts on it is, and again, I started to allude towards it at the end there, is look for smarter ways of gathering evidence, right? I know Des has been kind of advocating for the oral, but there will be other ways to capture that oral evidence if you need to. So be smart about how you're doing it. Don't create a rod for your own back, right? And also don't entrap yourself. And I think that's my biggest worry about documenting things, is that people tend to entrap themselves a little bit and make it, they seem to go from hero to zero, or zero to hero, sorry, when it comes to documentation. So just be mindful about it. If you choose to ignore Andy's advice and you do decide to document things, be smart about it, right? Be sensible about it. And again, I think understand what it is that you're trying to achieve by documenting said thing before you go forward and do it. Well, gentlemen, that's a wrap for the topic. If it's not documented, it did not happen. I tell you what, for our last show of the year, Des, I'm just so excited for you that you finally you're a winner. I was a bit worried there that we'd have to kind of go into some whole kind of EAP service program next year for you, but really excited for you. Well done.
All of my Christmas wishes have come true today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Oliver, listen, it's been really great to have your contribution to this. You've really brought a bunch of colour and vibrance that only you could bring to the show today, which is far greater than the other person that's in on your camera does most days. So well done. Thank you. Although I noticed Andy likes to make it all about himself and didn't update his name to say Andy and Oliver Evans, but that's okay. A big thank you, Oliver, for your contribution today and throughout the year. Andy, any final words from you, mate, for the people? I mean, what have you got planned for the Christmas break coming up? Are you anticipating actually doing anything, or?
Well, I'm going to cash in my 3 sessions of EAP.
Did we even offer that?
I don't think that the hearing this morning went the correct way, and certainly due process wasn't followed. And I've made a lot of notes during that process, and you'll be hearing from my lawyers.
Thank goodness.
The EOP number I gave him just diverts to my spare phone. So
and his lawyer number does too, right?
That's 2 instances now. That in my mind is bullying.
It's a great thing it's all recorded because we can use it to refute anything you state, Andy, especially once I doctor it with AI. So, no, brilliant, mate. And no, in all seriousness, mate, anything exciting coming up for you over the Christmas, New Year period?
Spending time with my family is fantastic. Just hanging out.
Fantastic. And Des, what exciting things have you got planned? Are you heading back down to Owakuni by any chance? I know you like that place.
No, we're heading north this time, hopefully for some nice beaches and some nice weather, but we'll see how we go.
Fantastic. I tell you what, so some more exciting. Yeah, I'm really excited today. Our last podcast for the year, and today officially my last day at Savory. So it's been a great 3 years there, and probably, to be fair, driven a lot of the topics and insights that have led us to some of the conversations that we've been having over the last, since the podcast started, really. So massive thank you to them. But I guess with all good things that come to an end, good things, I guess, you'd like to consider good things would start again. And next year, the three of us will have far more diversity as I move into another industry, and we will not be construction heavy with some of the anecdotes and examples that we'll be using to demonstrate how poorly we apply our trade out there in the real world. So fantastic. But now, gentlemen, just the gifts just keep on giving, right? It is Christmas, 'tis the season to be jolly and all that. Merry, merry, ho, ho, ho. Big thank you to our followers. Would you believe it? Oh, no. Bridge is using our own words against us. Lucky the show is documented in a recording, or it may not have happened. Wow, you got to love it, right? You've done well when people use your own words against you. But talking about using that, we have hit 1,600 plus followers on our LinkedIn page. And now, while it's not all about the quantity of numbers, as it is, it's about the quality of those numbers. And what I really like about our latest follower is our follower brings a great bit of diversity to the following audience. Now, the diversity doesn't come from what part of the world specifically that this follower is from. The diversity comes into the job title referenced in this individual's LinkedIn profile. So, gentlemen, and I think this could be a first. I don't know. Don't quote me on this. I haven't trawled through all of our 1,600 followers, but this could very well be our first finance manager to the group. So we're definitely diversifying in our audience and our reach. Not only is it a finance manager, this finance manager hails from the country of Pakistan. So a big welcome to Shamil Riaz. Welcome to the team. And I really look forward to hearing your insights, I guess, from a financial aspect of how safety can be applied. And maybe some interesting topics that could fall off that would be, and I know this following off the back of the show that Andy did with our mates at Sign On Site around the cost or the cost benefit of doing safety and doing it well. So Shamil, welcome to the party that is the Circus of Safety. And that's a wrap. Some exciting stuff lined up for the new year, isn't it, boys? We started making plans and actually doing some work on that yesterday, didn't we?
We did indeed.
Pretty excited
Exciting
about
times.
Did we?
Yeah, don't worry, Oliver. I was excluded as well. A bit awkward, though. They needed me to do the
Monopoly by myself.
Awkward, Andy. You might have to have a conversation after this.
Yeah, I know.
I
There'll be a few.
made him bankrupt.
Off the back of last week's topic, last show's topic, ironically, in the field of academia and health and safety, we got an exciting new. Would you call it a bit? I'm just having a mare. It's like a
bit of a
product
spin-off
offering,
series.
a spin-off series, product offering, spin-off series coming forward in the new year, which we're quite excited about. So watch this space for more details on that spin-off series in 2025 and beyond. But until then, followers, gentlemen, Oliver, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from me to you.
Merry Christmas to you, everyone.
Talk soon. See you later and catch you on the flip side.